You're listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Keane. I'm the editor-in-chief of the internationally renowned journal Fire Ecology. Fire Ecology is a journal that's run by AFE, or the Association for Fire Ecology, and published by Springer. Today, we are going to be talking about an incredibly interesting paper. I'm going to give you the title right now. Vegetation response varies by season of burning in pine woodlands across the southeastern U.S. We are lucky enough to have 3 of the 6 co-authors here. First, we have Jake Bones. He's the senior author. Jake, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Bob. My name's Jake Bones, and I'm with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency.
Welcome, and thanks for coming and sharing your information about this paper. Next is Craig Harper. Craig?
Hey, Bob. Craig Harper. I'm a professor of wildlife management and the Extension Wildlife Specialist at the University of Tennessee, working with UT Extension.
And last, we have Mark Turner. Mark?
Hey, Bob. Mark Turner here. I'm an assistant professor and Extension Wildlife Specialist at Oklahoma State University.
Well, thanks for donating your time to us. I really appreciate it. Craig, we're going to start off with you. This was an incredibly interesting paper to me. I read it, my jaw dropped because of the scope and the length of the study. Give us a little background of the study and tell us a little about it.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And of course, it's good to be here with you. I appreciate you highlighting us and the work that we've done. Of course, in upland wildlife management, one of the most common management practices, of course, is prescribed fire. And historically, land managers have used prescribed fire during the dormant season more than any other time of year. But in recent years, managers have begun to use fire during the growing season much more commonly. However, we know that there can be effects of burning on the vegetation community as well as the wildlife community by burning at different times of the year. And what we have found anecdotally over time is that burning during the early portion of the growing season isn't necessarily producing the same results as if you burn later in the growing season. And interestingly, in going through the literature, there was no study that had compared vegetation and wildlife effects of burning during all times of the year. There was a lot of studies that compared dormant season to early growing season fire or dormant season to late growing season fire, but most of these studies were limited in scope, the amount of times that they implemented the treatment, or how much replication they had. So we designed this study where we had 9 sites across 4 southeastern states, Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi, and worked collaboratively with the wildlife agencies in those states. And we set up a design where we looked at burning during all seasons of the year and compared that to an unburned control, and we looked at the effects on the plant community as well as the wildlife community. Now, in this paper, of course, we are describing the effects on the plant community, but there will be other papers where we publish the results on the wildlife community.
That's what I couldn't believe was the methods, Jake. When I saw that you had 72 burns, I was just amazed. And then while we were chatting before the podcast, I learned that this was your massive project, and that really blew my mind. So can you give us a little more detail on those methods?
Sure, Bob. Like you said, we implemented 72 burns over the course of the project, and we did that in 4 different seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. We call those dormant, early growing, mid growing, and late growing season fire. And these were just very low intensity fires just to limit any injury to overstory trees. And we documented everything during the fire, like whether we use strip heading fires or flanking fires. And then we would follow that up in the growing season and measure vegetation metrics like understory plants, any changes to overstory stems or DBH and things like that.
Wow, what a comprehensive study. And I know a lot of the listeners are sitting there giddy, hoping to get a glimpse of some of the results. Jake, can you tell us a little about what you found?
We documented changes, especially those in the forward plants, herbaceous broadleaf plants, and our dormant season fire and our late growing season fire actually increased that plant coverage the most. It's interesting to note that the dormant season fire had greater intensity than the late growing season fire, and they saw similar effects with changes to the forbs. So there's an interesting effect there that the dormant season fire also wasn't as effective as controlling some of the woody stems in the understory.
So these results, I imagine, are going to be really meaningful to managing these wonderful ecosystems. Mark, could you talk a little about what the management implications of this particular paper would be?
Absolutely. So the whole point of this project was to hopefully provide managers and landowners with good information that they can use to help guide the timing of fire that they're going to use on their properties. And I do think we've got some great results here so far to share. I think the first thing that we found was that we really like the effects of those late growing season treatments. There's a lot of people that aren't necessarily thinking about burning during September or October. And so there's really good opportunity there to both increase forb coverage, hopefully set back some of those woody stems more effectively than you might do during, say, the dormant season. And so folks should think about burning during that time of the year. And then kind of along a similar line of thinking, just thinking about burning throughout the year as opposed to only burning during one discrete time or another time. Not only can you hopefully shift the vegetation community towards a more desirable state, but you can also just get more burn days. And obviously for a lot of folks, having enough burn days is a big issue. So I think this project showed, just with the number of burns that were implemented, how you can effectively burn throughout essentially the entire year. You just have to wait for the right weather conditions.
One of the things that we pointed out in the paper and elsewhere, the importance of this plant composition, for example, forb coverage. Well, forbs are the primary food of species, including white-tailed deer, more nutritious than other plants. And so chronic burning during the dormant season or early portion of the growing season, if all of the woody sprouts are continuing to bust out and you're promoting more of a grassy understory rather than one that is more diverse with more forbs, that certainly can have lots of implications on the wildlife community, and not just vertebrate animals, but also the pollinators. And so there's a lot of interest in increasing both plant diversity and wildlife diversity, and we believe this is one way that managers certainly can do that.
So, Craig, you're the point person on this study. There were so many measurements on so many burns that there were other studies. What's the future of this study, and have you got other studies planned?
Yes, we have finished the third iteration of all of the treatments. We are in the sixth year of the study. I currently have 3 more graduate students on the project, and we are looking at the effects of the fire timing on different wildlife species, and we are continuing to monitor, of course, the plant community. And one of the students right now is doing a more detailed job with regard to plant effects going down to species, whereas in this first paper, we really summarize plant categories by forbs and grasses, semi-woody, woody, etc. So we are continuing the project. We're hoping that it will be more long-term than short-term and get in at least 4 or 5 iterations, of course, on a 2-year fire return interval. That means that you're going to spend at least 10 or 12 years on a project. But these long-term data really are what we need to much better understand the effects of prescribed fire and when fire is used.
Craig, you got to promise me you're going to publish all that great stuff in fire ecology when it all comes to maturity, I hope.
Bob, I can promise you that you will be receiving some, whether it be for pollinators or white-tailed deer or wild turkeys or plant diversity.
Jake, just to close out, do you want to recognize any co-authors or funding agencies?
Yes, Bob, I can. I'd like to recognize my co-author, Spencer Marshall. Of course, my authors here, Mark Turner and Dr. Craig Harper, Maya Lapp, Dr. Will Goldsby, and Dr. Emma Wilcox as the extent of my co-authors. And our funding agencies were TWRA, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, the Tennessee Valley Authority, Alabama DCNR, the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, and the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources.
Well, I want to thank you all 3 for a wonderful session in this podcast telling us about this great paper. Those of you who are listening, if you want to read all about this, and I will tell you this, is that these guys left a lot on the table, and there's a lot more to eat in that paper if you want to read it. That's why you can download it for free. Craig and all his crew, Craig, Jake, and Mark, have paid the freight for you to get it for free. So please download this paper, read all about this wonderful ecosystem in this unbelievable study. And please, again, tune in with me for the next Fire Ecology Chats.
Thank you for listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our show and leave us a review. To learn more about fire ecology and support our future work by becoming a member, visit fireecology.org. FIREECOLOGY.org.